This is Ground Affected. My name is Brent, and welcome to Still Believing in the Shark at the deep end of the swimming pool. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I painted the scorpion from C27 miniatures and terrains. I will have a link for them down in the description below if you just look down below. And while you're down there, make sure to click like and subscribe. If I haven't earned your subscription by the end of this video, then it's as easy as following the instructions I will leave you in the last few seconds of the video. In a couple of my videos that I've created, I've said, and I always maintain this, that painting miniatures is one of the best ways to hone your skills. I think I need to clarify though what I mean when I say I paint miniatures. There is a stigma around the way you paint miniatures. In fact, it's almost like a cult where people decide that there is one way to paint miniatures, and that's by putting a base coat down, putting a wash over the top of that, then dry brushing, and that's the way you paint your miniature. That is one way to paint your miniature, but that's not the only way to paint your miniature. And in fact, a lot of the techniques and procedures that are used to paint miniatures can be used to paint large statues and bigger models. It's actually exactly the same techniques on most of the things. Wet blending, glazing, dry brushing, glaring, stippling, etc, etc, etc. These same techniques can be applied whether you're doing it in small or large. The difference is when you're doing something in small, you're able to see the overall composition of the piece that you're creating. This helps your mind see everything in one, as opposed to when you're making a model in a couple of pieces, your brain doesn't see that whole model until the end. And sometimes our minds just completely forget that there is an entire composition to take into account. And for me, painting models that are this big costs a lot less in paint and a lot less in time, so the investment for return of learning is a lot higher. So with the model this small, I'm going to start with a zenithal. This is just going to help for me to be able to actually differentiate between parts on the model itself. I always regret using a zenithal in the end, but in this case it's okay because the model itself is quite a light model. I made sure to keep quite a bit of black in the recesses though. I started out by painting him jungle green from Army Painter, which in itself is not a very strong green. So I ended up mixing my own version of this, which was jungle green mixed with a bit of demonic yellow. This gave it a bit more of a pungent color, but still not strong enough for me. And again, I wasn't quite happy with the color, so I mixed all the three colors, a bunch of different colors eventually, and we ended up with a green that seems to work. Good luck trying to figure out that recipe because I can't even remember what I did. I'm sorry about that, but it's green with more green and a little bit of yellow to help make it a bit more green. It's easy. Just mix green and yellow and a little bit of green and go lighter and bright. There we go. Take some black and I'm gonna spray the base. Getting a little bit brave with my airbrush these days, and I'm just gonna friggin' spray around his boots. I have to paint them anyway, so a little bit of overspray is not the worst. Using a method that I used in one of the last videos that I did with Gumasozek, I really enjoyed the color of his base that I made, so I thought that the contrast between that sort of bluishy, grayish kind of rock versus the greens of the scorpion himself, I think the contrast will be really nice. I then used a blue wash from Citadel and just based over the whole of that. I then just gave a base coat to the little skull that's on the base as well. And then of course, I made another mistake. I always do this where I choose the wrong color and then I have to come back and redo it again. But in this case, you'll be able to see the difference. The contrast between the greens is not enough. Yes, it could work, but it's definitely not enough. You'll see quite soon the difference between the darker green and the lighter green makes a world of difference to what actually is a good composition for the entire piece. So the contrast between the two colors is much more stark. This obviously creates a bit more visual interest and helps the model look a little bit more complete. Super carefully, I also painted this over the little mask on his head. My dear holy cow. That is probably one of the most difficult things I've done, and definitely the reason why I like to paint miniatures like this. This helps to hone those brush control skills that are super important for painting things. If you can paint it this small, it'll be so much easier when you have to go to a larger model and you have so much more space. Those eyes that you were struggling before suddenly become easy, because trust me, painting eyes on a dude this size of your thumb is not easy. I used roughly the same procedure for skin tones on this. I cut out 1 or 2 steps just to make life easier. And then I used a green wash and went into all the creases around the model, as well as I used yellow mixed into the green in order to create a very light highlighted color, which I used to push the contrast even more on the suit. Whilst I'm doing the lines on the suit, the best thing to do is keep 2 brushes, one that's dry and one that you're going to paint with, so that if you do make any mistakes or go outside of the crease, then you can wipe that off using a bit of water, or you can lick it if you really want. But most importantly, notice that I'm not using a wash all over the place, because that will dirty up the entire model. It'll muddy the colors and they won't look as bright and vibrant. Going back in with some more highlights on the skin tones, obviously I've got to work those up slowly as I build it. I also then have to do the mask section around his eyes. I used a bit of yellow, quite a bit of yellow actually, and I highlighted a load of areas using a stippling motion, as well as using a layering effect. I did a couple of edge highlights here and there. And then working on the base, I gave the rock just a bit of a dry brush just to bring out some of the edges, as well as caught some of the edges with a bit of white just to create a bit more depth. Using Molotov Chrome, which is a marker refill that I bought, I used that to do his little stinger on the end of his tail. And now that the rock is done, I can go through and paint his little boots, and I can make sure that the boots are solid, and then I've obviously got to go back into those and add a bit of a highlight to them as well, but it starts to come together a lot quicker at this point. Adding the highlight, I'm just following the direction of the light that I'd already chosen. If you notice, the back of the model is quite dark versus the front of the model. Then using Armageddon Dust, which is a technical paint from Citadel, I'm going to paint that all across the bottom. This has just got a bit of texture in it. It's like a sandy texture, just to create some texture on the base and make it look like there's a bit of sand on it, essentially. Taking a glaze of yellow just to push that tail on the front a little bit more forward. By doing that, I'm creating a separation between the foreground and the background. So those highlights are not just for fun, it's because I'm creating a separation between what's in the background and what's in the foreground. And talking of that separation, that is also done by spraying Agrax Earthshade as a wash from the back of the model towards the front, again creating a perspective that the front is lighter and the back is darker. This helps to force your eye and gives it a bit of perspective. Using AK Interactive powders, I'm going to use that on the face just to bring some more color into it, and that's pretty much the end of how I made him. Hopefully that this video inspired you or gave you any kind of insight into painting miniatures and what it's like in order to get your own miniature painted from out the printer to a great looking statue or little model on your shelf. And this light is really overbearing. And of course, if you felt like any of the information was worthwhile, then share it to one of your friends. Comment on the video, leave your thoughts in the description, past the description, in the little box at the bottom. There's a little thing you can type in what you want to say. Just say something in there, because it helps the algorithm and makes my video go out to more people, which will obviously help the channel so that we can become
the supreme overlord of all painting upon the YouTube.
That's actually ridiculous, because but if you don't care about any of that, then make sure to check my description if you want to join the community over on Discord. Speaking of Patreon, there's a couple people I'd like to thank for joining the Patreon. Eric Stevenson and Willie Cash, my dudes, thank you so much for joining the Patreon. Your support means too much for the entire growth of this channel. Okay, none of that. Jesus Christ. By the way, competition soon, new merch soon. Keep your eye open for that coming soon. Thank you for coming. Understand there's a description, and within that description there are things for you to click upon. Please do these things, and if you don't like any of that, click the dislike button. F*** off, bro. I don't think any of that made any sense. It's fine, they'll figure it out.